Welcome and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining LINX's Spotlight on Scotland. I think just to set the scene, over the past few months, I've noticed increasing interest in activity, certainly with LINX Scotland, on content players and access networks being interested in connecting to LINX Scotland. And I think we've also seen some interesting developments in terms of major carriers connecting to our data center partners. And I think this general ecosystem, as we've seen some activity and some interest. So as a company LINX, we thought we'd try and build on this ecosystem, build on this interest rather, and look at how we can sort of develop this further. And hence we're very pleased to host this event today. I'd like to take the opportunity just to introduce our sales team. We have Terry Carr, who is really going to be focusing and supporting, particularly Charlie, I guess, with respect to the LINX Scotland Steering Committee. We find this a very sort of fundamental part of what LINX do in terms of trying to organise and support where we can development of LINX Scotland. And also I'd like to introduce Mark Stokes, who's been working very heavily on prospecting, access and content networks to join LINX Scotland. Okay, so I guess for all of us, it's been an interesting year, to put it mildly, and I think there appears to be light at the end of the tunnel. But I think going forward, you know, we certainly hope in the near future we'll be able to see each other face to face. But for the time being, we're still going to be putting on webinars and online events, so look out for events and links. Just a bit of feedback for this, please. We want to keep this session interactive, so please use the Q&A button. And this session has been recorded and will be on the Learn with LINX and YouTube very, very soon. Okay, that's all for me for the time being. I'll be introducing the speakers as we go along. I'd like to hand over to Terry Carr, who's going to go through facts and figures of LINX Scotland. Terry, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody this morning. And it's great to see everyone. Just for the benefit of everybody who is actually on the call now, just what is LINX Scotland? Well, very simply, LINX Scotland was founded on the principle of keeping data local for users in Scotland. It's membership driven. So I think it's very important for you to understand that LINX as an organisation is owned by the members. It's not a commercial organisation. It's definitely a not-for-profit. So I think it's important, again, as a takeaway from today, to understand that the LINX team is here to support the members, and we're not here to drive huge amounts of value out of you, profit from you. LINX Scotland actually provides really vital local peering. The co-location and connection options in Scotland for local businesses are supported fundamentally by LINX. So it's a local organisation, it's a local business, and it supports local business. And the important thing is we keep your data safe, assured, and transparent. So, you know, if somebody wants to understand what that means and in some depth, please reach out to me, have a conversation with me or any other member of the LINX team. But the fundamental takeaways of today are, please understand, LINX Scotland is a local and vital supporter of Scottish businesses. And I'll just very briefly just explain how big it is. And we're going to have two of our partners who will be on the call in a moment. We'll have Pulsant and DataVita, and they'll be explaining how we have a facility up here in Scotland that regularly moves a gig of data per month through the exchange. Last month it peaked at over 2.3 gig, and at some point in the recent history, we've maxed out at 12.5 gig on a particular day. It's got a 5 nines uptime. So from the perspective of, is it a safe, secure, and also is it an available service? Yes, it absolutely is. So that's what I wanted to say, guys. Don't want to dwell on that. We've got Q&A coming from later in the day, and we've got Charlie Boisseau coming on, who is the steering committee chairman. And at that point, I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions coming from the audience. So with that, I'd like to close my little bit and hand back to Holly, for her to move us on into the meat of this presentation. So thank you.
Okay, Terry, thanks very much. I've got no questions in the chat at the moment, so I'd like to now pass on to Mark Butcher from DataVita, who's going to take us through data center sustainability and reducing carbon footprint. Over to you, Mark.
Hello, everyone. I'm assuming you can see my screen. Hopefully, the answer is yes. So I'm Mark Butcher from DataVita. Unfortunately, I'm having camera problems this morning, which is slightly inhibiting you from actually seeing me. But we're a data center and cloud provider, obviously based in Scotland. The goal for my presentation is to give you a really quick run through, and it is fairly quick, of how organisations the world over are using Scottish co-location and cloud to meet their sustainability targets, to reduce digital pollution and save themselves a lot of money. Over the last few years, people have started to realise the scale of the carbon footprint associated with our increasing dependence on IT in every aspect of our lives. Not many people really realise, but the internet's responsible for generating around 1 billion tonnes of CO2 emissions per year, which, if you put it into context, if the internet was a country, it would actually be the 6th largest polluter on the planet. And the problem isn't kind of getting any better. So currently, global data centres are estimated to consume around 2% of the world's power. And at current growth rates, this will hit 10% by 2030. It's an exceptionally large amount. So if you put this into even more context, kind of 1 billion tonnes of CO2 is actually more than the entire aviation industry was responsible for pre-COVID. So the aviation industry was about 919 million tonnes, and IT alone was well over 1 billion. And the problem is that a lot of these emissions are actually created by kind of wasted resources and inefficient aged data centres and services. And it isn't just an IT-centric issue either. So it's not just stuck within the boundaries of IT. The problem is as much related to how our end users consume our services and how we build and kind of deliver them. I'll give you sort of a little example. Every day, 306 billion emails are sent. Problem with that is that 80% of them are never opened. And more local example, if everyone in the UK was a little less polite, we all send those emails just saying thanks. If we sent one less of those a day, that would actually cut CO2 emissions by 16,000 tonnes a year. And that's equivalent to 80,000 flights from London to Barcelona. And another good example, kind of streaming video is a giant culprit. So streaming on 4G consumes 23 times as much energy compared to just streaming on Wi-Fi. And then you've got the impact of what all designers love to do. They love to stream everything out in HD or Ultra HD. But we should try changing that, watching content in a lower definition, because streaming HD content creates anything up to about 10 times more carbon emissions when compared to standard definition. And on the mobile devices that most of us watch things on, you can't actually really tell the difference. So it's no great secret, kind of bringing it back to what we're talking about today, is that the average on-premise data center is not particularly environmentally friendly or power efficient. But what most people don't realize is how big the difference is, nor how much it's actually costing them. So there really isn't a comparison from an efficiency perspective when you compare a data center like DataVita's, which we operate with an efficiency ratio known as PUE of just 1.18, which if you compare it to the average sort of aged on-premise facility, which obviously the picture here is a bit of an extreme example, they typically are 60 to 80% less efficient, many of them operating with an efficiency ratio of 2 or even more. So the good news is that adopting kind of a hybrid approach with a blend of kind of co-location and cloud can help you reduce the impact your IT services are having on the planet. That's a good thing. So by design, providers like kind of DataVita and others in the industry, and the public cloud companies like Google, Microsoft and Amazon, we all operate massively efficiently because it's in our interest to do so. It's built into our DNA, and our facilities are generally, firstly, much newer, and they're designed with sustainability in mind. And equally importantly, kind of our scale compared to most end users allows us to invest in technologies that just aren't financially viable for the average data center consumer. So we use every piece of technology we can to drive down our power consumption. In our case, we have the lovely benefit of the Scottish weather because we use free air cooling, we use cold aisle containment, we have highly efficient UPSs, and importantly, we use exceptionally advanced AI-centric monitoring to aggressively track our power consumption at all times. And we're also already using 100% renewable energy. And from a DataVita perspective, we're working towards being nearly 100% off grid by 2025 with self-generated sustainable power. And also, even if you step inside kind of the data center services and look at the cloud platforms that we deliver, we build them using massively consolidated, latest generation kind of infrastructure. We maximize asset utilization wherever we can on multi-tenant platforms. So we try and operate as near the edge as we possibly can without impacting SLAs. And you add into this kind of extensive automation and use of things like dynamic provisioning means that we can adapt and make changes very, very quickly to avoid any waste whatsoever. So once you actually factor in kind of the reduction in kind of physical infrastructure, the reduction in power due to the massive efficiencies that we have, the better power mix that we use, the end result is that a provider like us can help someone reduce their carbon emissions by 88% or more, which is a massively substantial amount and a huge drive. So where do you start? There are some really simple steps that you can take to reduce your carbon footprint and optimize your data center footprint. The first thing is actually work out where you are today. So whether you're on-premise, already in the cloud, or a blend of everything, you actually need to build some benchmarks and establish your carbon footprint and your actual cost base today, so you have an accurate pitch that you can move on from. Then it's about choosing your providers carefully, because not all providers in the market are the same. And this applies whether you're talking about public cloud, co-location, SaaS vendors. There are some good ones, there's some great ones, and there's also some very, very bad ones. Choose a SaaS vendor or choose a data center provider or colo provider like us who uses renewable energy, who has a drive towards being 100% sustainable and carbon free, rather than the ones who are operating on, still running on fossil fuels. And if you are still running your own data centers or planning a refresh, clearly I'm a little bit biased. I'd like you to stop that, obviously. But consider it very carefully, because it's exceptionally unlikely that you could ever reach the same levels of efficiency that a good co-location or cloud provider can actually deliver. And as I said, our aim is to be carbon free by 2030, and as I said, off the grid by 2025. And if you are already using the public cloud, then select an operating region that actually uses direct local renewable energy, because that has a big impact as well. And look at how you're delivering your services. So look at changing the region in which you're delivering your services from during times where there's a high proportion of renewable energy in the provider's grid. That could be due to things like kind of hydropower, or shifting workloads to a time of day when renewable energy supply is abundant. So running development workloads out of hours, that kind of thing. So you and your development teams might not be able to choose kind of 100% direct local renewable energy for all cloud and SaaS services, but it can be factored into your decision making as another kind of cross-functional requirement, along with things like kind of accessibility, price, security, performance, and the usual aspects that we think of. Because the more your teams become aware of the impact of their actions and the trade-offs you can make, it enables them to make more informed choices. And over time, what it means is the percentage of direct renewable energy in your digital supply chain will massively increase, and you'll find actually your carbon footprint will reduce significantly. Then there's the optimization. The average cloud customer wastes 45% of their spend, with some wasting up to 80% or more. So financially, this is kind of really bad enough, but think about what that means to the carbon footprint. And if I put it into a context, global cloud spend in the last 12 months was more than 150 billion pounds. So assume 45% of that is waste, that's nearly 70 billion pounds in wasted spend across the globe. And the majority of kind of cloud optimizations which will reduce cost also have a direct knock-on into reducing energy usage and making you more efficient and driving down your carbon footprint. Optimizing cloud spend isn't difficult, but it does require focus. It comes back to the same thing. It's having visibility into your usage, knowing your access patterns, followed by a whole bunch of steps to actually optimize your current setup. But importantly, making it an ongoing process, having governance in place to ensure that you actually maintain it and you don't let everything creep back up again. And then finally, re-architecting your platforms and services. Assuming you haven't already done so on a cloud journey, it's pivotal that you take the time to re-architect and re-platform your services to fully benefit from what all your providers can offer. And this can be anything from co-location to the right kind of racks and systems. It can be into infrastructure as a service, or if you're looking at the public cloud, looking at things like serverless computing, Kubernetes. So making the most of automation to place your workloads where they belong, when they belong there, kind of the right cloud at the right time. So the conclusion, as I said, this is going to be rapid today. The good news is that reducing your IT carbon footprint is a win-win for all stakeholders in your business. Firstly, if you do it right, you will help your organization meet their sustainability goals. Switching to a provider, I'm obviously biased, like DataVita, who offer kind of sustainable co-location and cloud services, will help you reduce your carbon footprint by 80% or more. Secondly, and by doing this, you will kind of inevitably actually save money as well. So there is a good financial return on investment. The more efficient your data centers and cloud services are, the less you'll find you're spending on IT. Then there's the softer, more intangible things. So you've got stuff like brand perception and user experience, both internally and externally, matter more than ever. And communicating your efforts to reduce your carbon footprint have got a huge value to your consumer base and your customer base. It's been found in studies that 81% of global consumers feel strongly that companies should help improve the environment. So what this means is that it doesn't matter whether you're kind of consumer facing B2B or a public sector type body, your customers and users are increasingly considering environmental performance as part of their decision-making criteria when they choose to buy. So the outcome of an IT strategy focused on efficiency is often an improved customer experience with faster and more responsive applications as well. So your development can be sped up, your development can be better. And the growth of things like edge computing, which I think someone's covering later, moves computing from kind of central services closest to the edge, can also be used to further reduce your energy and emissions, as well as delivering kind of faster and better services. And as I said, you can speed up development times by improving developer efficiency. Optimizing build pipelines and code so it's faster and more efficient, such as by reducing unnecessary dependencies that consume extra resources, can massively speed up your development processes, helping to reduce costs, reduce energy usage, and making your developers' lives easier and making them happier so they can focus on delivering values. Then there's actually retaining and attracting kind of talent inside your organization. You find 70% of employees have said in a study that they're more likely to work at a company with a strong environmental agenda and more likely to stay in the long term. And in recent years, we've seen it hugely in the tech sector, where the employees have actually been agitating and demanding greater action from their companies on climate change. And then don't forget the investors by disclosing your carbon footprint information, because a lot of them are demanding it now. So public and private companies everywhere are facing increased regulatory and compliance requirements directly linked to sustainability. Even some investment funds are actually actively investing in more sustainable companies because they're seeing a greater return. And BlackRock actually recently announced in its annual letter that climate risk is a financial investment risk, and they're looking at sustainability for every investment they're making. So overall, and I appreciate I rattled through this very quickly, what's clear is taking a green approach to IT and co-location and cloud can help you not only save the planet, but it can also have potential to save you a lot of money, improve your customer experience, and improve your applications and services. It's a pretty easy and simple business case to make, but it does require focus. And that's me done. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thanks, Mark. I especially found that interesting, actually, the points about 8% of emails are unopened and the streaming point. I wonder how many people think about that. It's very interesting analysis there. We have a couple of questions, 3 questions, I think, so far. Mark, the first one was, will 5G not increase this pollution aspect even more?
So actually, I did a lot of work with a global telco last year, and they've actually found so whilst there has been a power increase at the 5G mast, they're finding actually they're getting greater efficiencies. But the challenge you'll find is it's the end users who are the ones who are driving the consumption, because the providers themselves think actually they're having more efficient sort of edge devices, which are consuming less power, but people are using more of the resources. So that's actually one of the issues. Is quite often it isn't the providers themselves that are the problem, it's the end consumers that are the problem, because the more we get access to, the more we demand.
Sure. Okay, another question was, given today's news, how do you calculate the green impact of your data center caching fires?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, sure. Given today's news, how do you calculate the green impact of your data centers caching fires?
Caching fires?
Yes, that's what it says. Sorry, Mark. I'm just reading out.
I may have to take that question later with a little bit more context.
No problem. We'll get it's the anonymous attendee, so we'll get back to them on that one.
Thank you.
Another question was, where in Scotland are green data centres located, and what is the incentive to use them in remote locations?
Well, that's kind of a very, very good question. So DataVita's data centres near Glasgow. It was purpose built in 2016, and And it's always been from the start to use the most sustainable technology. And as I said, our plan, so we're currently in the process of building out a wind farm.
Okay.
And so that we can be 100% self-generated power by 2025. And that's an ambitious goal. It may be that we only get to 70 to 80% because of the demands, but our plan is to be 100%.
Cool.
And there aren't many sustainable facilities in the UK yet, but it is a growing market.
Okay. And apologies, is my reading, it's very small text, actually was a point about your data center catching fire. I think there was a note news this morning at OVH in France, actually data center caught fire. So the question was, apologies, it's given today's news, how do you calculate the green impact of your data center catching fire?
That's something, yeah, I think planning around that could be a wee bit of a challenge, obviously.
Yeah. Very good point.
Yes, yeah, no, and I mean, you'll have the challenge with the infrastructure, but actually there is an interesting point there. A lot of the infrastructure that's going into data centers now, so we're proactively buying equipment in our supply chain where we can actually source and prove that they are driving down the carbon emissions in the supply chain as well. So part of it is actually a cultural change within your organization, because a lot of organizations only actually monitor what they're directly responsible for. So, their buildings, their cars, their products. They don't actually follow enough down their supply chain. And that's something which I think governments of the world are starting to try and enforce, which is making sure that you're not just responsible and accountable for what you produce, you're also responsible for your wider supply chain. Which means companies using providers like co-location providers like DataVita or any others, or public cloud, are actually going to have to start interrogating their providers in more detail about their wider sustainability initiatives.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Mark. 2 more questions. I think we should move on. The next one is, what type of third parties are you using to provide an audit of the green credentials of your data center?
Funnily enough, that's something we're just in discussion with, because we're just currently changing the auditors that we use, because there's some specifically who focus on green audits, and because there is the whole IT market has been subject to a huge amount of what we would call greenwashing over the last couple of years, where when you actually got into the detail of how people are doing it, it doesn't stand up to interrogation, particularly around things like the use of renewable energy certificates as well, right, which actually doesn't really actually do anything to help the environment. Hence why we're shifting to trying to have self-generated power so we can actually be 100% clean.
Right, thank you very much. And I think the last question we've got is a comment really, was that please don't blame inefficiency on the end user. It is 100% up to the service provider to provide the sustainable options.
I agree completely, but what I would counter that with is that as the providers and designers of applications and services, we need to help the consumer to make the right choice. Yeah. If I was to put that in a context of a very good example I've seen recently from an online retailer in the Nordics, they now have a website which is constructed where the end user has to click a switch to choose the full functioning high definition version. By default, it's put into low definition with the minimum possible distribution of images, content, videos, and everything. So it's a really, really extremely light, low touch website. And if the consumer wants to make the choice to actually have the high powered sucking the power out of the world one, they have to make that choice. But yes, I agree. The onus has to be on the providers themselves to design things efficiently. We can't just blame the consumer.
Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Mark. That was great. No more questions. Thanks, Mark. Well done. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next speaker we've got is Erling, who is the CEO of Celtic Norse, and he's going to give an overview of the planned sea cable from Nordics to Ireland and opportunities for Scottish partnerships. Erling, over to you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Erling Arnesen. I'm CEO of Celtic Norse. Thank you for having me today. It's a real honor to address this assembly. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project connecting Norway and Ireland with a branch to Scotland. So how did we come up with this idea? Well, a few years back, we were standing up on this moor up in Norway. It's a 1.5 million square meters, 150 hectares of land, 370 acres if you're American, and it's basically nothing here, just exceptional amounts of unused land with very little agricultural value and things like that. but there are huge power resources in this area. It would be a perfect place for a large-scale data center, if you will. What we discovered when we met up with the site selection team at this area, and they were looking to place a facility like this one. This is Facebook's data center in the north of Sweden. That we were not prepared to answer questions about connectivity, international connectivity. We were looking towards connecting our potential customer of this land to a city like Oslo, or possibly over to Stockholm. That was as much as we were looking into, and we could not answer any questions they had about how do we connect to the US, how do we connect to the flap markets in Europe and such. And that was how Celtic Norse came about. I will get into the specifics of that in a little while. Now, if you look at data centers, like the previous presentation touched upon, there is a tremendous amount of growth in processing and transport of data. Cloud services grows in a ridiculous amount of each year. The traffic increase means that you will have to put in more and more cables to connect all these data centers. And there has been a tremendous amount of growth in the Nordics, in the highlighted region here. This is the region of the Nordics that does not have the best power resources. Denmark, south of Sweden, south of Finland is not the best places in terms of power, but it is the best places in terms of international connectivity. Given that if you look at the global map, you have all this connectivity coming in from Russia into Finland and down into Europe, and you have the old transatlantic cables, the northern ones that land in Denmark, and that is the reason why the data centers have developed in this area, with the sole exception of Facebook ones in the north of Sweden, which it's the exception that confirms the rule, really, in my book. Now, with the new cables landing now, we've seen some development in the south part of Norway, but the rest of southern Norway really has some of the same problems as you will find in Scotland. You want to develop this industry more. You would like an OTT, a hyperscaler developed in your area, but they choose to go other places. So one of the reasons for us putting Celtic Norse in motion was to develop this area of to the north of Oslo, which has tremendous amount of power resources, large tracts of very suitable land to putting up data centers, and the third factor being the international connectivity. Now, the partners who wants this to happen is 3 energy companies in Norway. I won't try pronouncing the names in English, really. You can read them yourself. I use NTE, TE, and Eidsiva as the short versions of it. They own 1/3 of Celtic Norse each. Now, these companies are both into energy, grid operations. They have their own fiber optic broadband areas of business, and their combined yearly revenue is about 2 billion euros. So they are the companies behind Celtic Norse. And we also have very good partnerships. Scottish Futures Trust in Scotland, James King, who is attending here today, helped us out in starting up with the work in Scotland to branch into the north of Scotland, and basically put us in touch with Atlantis Energy, who's our landing partner for Scotland. For the Irish section, we have Aquacoms as a partner that some of you might know, and they will be taking care of everything in Ireland for us. Now, this is a map representation of Celtic Norse. It's a 2,000 kilometer long sea cable, repeated sea cable system, going from outside the city of Trondheim, just on a beach just south of that city, to a place called Killala Bay in County Mayo in Ireland. And the Scottish branch is planned for a place called Caithness in the extreme north tip of Scotland. It's a repeated system, which means that it has electrical repeaters to amplify the signal to make everything travel fast. It's 20 terabits per fiber pair, 8 fiber pairs. We have 21 repeaters, and it's an active system that's planned. Round trip delay from Norway to Scotland, if you take that, would be about 40 milliseconds beach to beach with added connectivity for backhaul on land. Now, okay, let's put the cable into a bigger perspective. Celtic Norse extends an already existing cable that goes from Ireland to New York City. That's called AEC1. It's 5 years old. We basically extend that from Killala Bay, where it lands today, and up to Trondheim with the branch to Scotland. That's the lower red line on the map, west of Ireland. The red line above that is the new AEC2 Havfrue system that branches into Scotland, but the main trunk lands in outside Esbjerg in Denmark, and there is a branch into Norway as well. In addition, that's a new system. Went live just recently, and also there are 2 new systems connecting the Nordics to not Scotland but to Glasgow, being put in as we speak. So there is a tremendous amount of new international connectivity being developed in this area. Celtic Norse being the only one who is trying to do something inside Scotland. So let's add another layer here. There's no use building a beach-to-beach submarine cable if you do not have the terrestrial connectivity. So we have looked into, with our partners, how to provide the best terrestrial connectivity for our cable and to enhance the future business. That means that we will connect Oslo and Stockholm up to the starting point, the beach in Norway, and head on down south to Scotland and Ireland. From there, we land in Caithness, where we have a 2-way terrestrial part submarine system going down to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Going down to Dublin, to Ireland, to Killala Bay, we have a similar setup that goes into Dublin. The two terrestrial backhaul routes is really for safety reasons. That's basically how you choose to connect a landing station on a beach on a submarine cable. You have 2 terrestrial routes connecting them to the data centers. One of the data centers planned in Scotland is DataVita, actually, who was the last presenter, so you know that. Yeah, a little bit more on terrestrial backhaul. We are part of a dark fiber consortium in the Nordics for 4 countries, something called Easy Fiber. It's a fiber consortium consisting of a number of regional companies that have pooled all their dark fiber resources to enhance our offerings to the OTTs. And we can basically deliver dark fiber solutions all over the 4 Nordic countries. and
Erling, just up there, just clarification. We just had a few notes about where the actual terrestrial cable terminates. I think James has said it's Newcastle, not Edinburgh or not Glasgow.
Sorry, did I say? I'm sorry, I meant to say Newcastle. That's correct. Sorry for the mix.
No problem. No problem.
Yes, the two cables crossing the North Sea now, Havingstons and in the UK, they land in Stellium, the Stellium data center outside.
Yes, we know it. Yes. Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with Scotland.
Yeah.
Sorry for that mix-up. So we used the Easy Fiber Consortium to get our terrestrial backhaul in line for the UK and Ireland. There's no such consortium in place, but we have used regional providers to work up those routes and how to connect to the data centers where they are. So if you take all this connectivity and look at it holistically on one map, it's a tremendous amount of new connectivity being planned at the moment, and that should benefit not just the Nordics, but also the UK and Ireland in the years to come. Yeah, that was basically it, guys. I'll be happy to take some questions if you want.
Yes, Erling, certainly. We've got one question so far, and that is, what was the reason for using Caithness as a landing point? Is the reason that power stations are there or other infrastructure? Will the terrestrial route from Caithness to Edinburgh use the fibre optic cable bundle to the submarine power cable?
That's a fantastic question. I'd be very happy to answer that, and I probably should have touched upon it. The reason for that is that our landing party for Scotland is CIMEC Atlantis Energy. Now, CIMEC Atlantis Energy has a concession for a tidal power generation scheme up in Scapa Flow. I believe they have if I remember correctly, a 6 megawatt facility in place now. They're looking to take that up to 40 and beyond. And what they want to do is to possibly put in a data center locally up there and use that tidal power to just put into this data center and using the power there instead of putting it onto the national grid. But you still need the terrestrial connectivity that I show you to be able to connect south down to the central belt. But their business is to put a data center there on the beach, and they could then use the branch on Celtic Norse to go straight to the US, up to the Nordics, and connect with very low latency to other data centers.
Okay, great. Another question, I think we've got, has the Scottish Government invested in this development, or is it all funded by enterprises?
This is all funded by enterprises. The Scottish Government, through Scottish Futures Trust, has been a facilitator to us. And I do believe that CIMEC Atlantis Energy have some involvement with the Scottish Government in terms of some possible green financing or whatnot, but that's really their business, not ours. Celtic Norse, as such, is untouched by government money either in Scotland or in the Nordics or in Ireland.
And another question, sir, we have is the new cable systems that land in Ireland are coming into the west coast of the Republic of Ireland,
yes,
giving only an EU presence. Why do you think that these providers are not using the benefits of Northern Ireland as a landing point and the existing duct infrastructure that takes in the key cities of Derry, Belfast on the way to Dublin to give both UK and EU presence?
I can't speak for on how their strategic thinking is on that subject. I could offer up possibly a technical reason why you don't do that, because if you if you build a new cable across the Atlantic and you're coming in from the west, right, you want the length of cable on the fishing grounds in shallow water of less than 1,000 meters deep. You want that segment of the cable to be as small as possible. So it makes sense to go into the west coast of Ireland as soon as you can. Now, if you have long stretches of cable in shallow water, it means higher risk, higher construction costs, because you have to plow the cable into the seabed. If you go back to the map of Celtic Norse, you will see that the design of Celtic is very much taking that on board, that we try to use a deep water route going through between Norway and Ireland as much as we can. That is for safety reasons.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I think we'll take one more question, and I think it's something I'm quite interested in as well. And it's, may I ask who the terrestrial backhaul partners are, please? And I think in all these situations, you did point out, Erling, that the backhaul, terrestrial backhaul is so important, and you know, you haven't got a situation, we've got a golden fiber situation where people paying lots of money for backhaul. Can you give us a bit more detail about that?
Well, we've the partners who've been our commercial partners for Scotland is Scottish and Southern Energy. Their fiber networks that will, if you look at the map that we proposed, they are the partner that we are looking to work with. It could possibly be others, but that's what on the map now. And the backhaul in Ireland is based on Aurora, which is the gas provider in Ireland, and also the backhaul of Airtel.
Brilliant. Erling, thank you very much. That's very, very enlightening and interesting. Any more questions, guys? If there are any questions that we've missed, I'll make sure us and the marketing team get them to the respective speakers and get their answers for you guys. So thank you very much, Erling. That's great. Thank you very much.
I will stay on for the rest of this conference. Okay. So if there are any questions, just drop me a chat line or something. I will try to answer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Excellent. Now over to James now. James, who is Scottish Futures Trust.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here as ever. I'm wearing two hats, clearly the Scottish Futures Trust, who pays my wages, but also Hosting Scotland, which is an initiative that I set up a few years ago. That was really set up to address three things: international connectivity, data centers themselves, and the internet exchange. So I think that all of the conversation thus far has really touched on bits of that. I'm sure you'll all be delighted to know that I've only got 5-minute slot, so I shall keep this brief. I think a number of the questions have really got to the nub of some of the issues that we've been looking at and been facing. What I can say is that the next few weeks will provide a lot more clarity to the sector about exactly what Scotland is looking to do. I can't really go into too much more detail about that because it is very much a ministerial thing to do. But within the next 2 weeks, I would expect there to be major announcements on that front that will look into all of the aspects that have been talked about thus far in the conference. I think that one of the things that was touched on earlier with regards to DataVita is that any and all of the support that comes from the public sector towards data centers in Scotland will be strictly on the basis of them being green. There is simply no question about that. And the greenwashing element that was mentioned earlier just simply won't stack up. So any support in terms of, I can't really see it being financial, let's be honest, but I think it'll be more in terms of helping to join the dots, helping to build demand cases, helping to work with planning, helping to do all that kind of peripheral stuff. Will be strictly on the basis that we can almost look at the generation of the renewable energy and say, okay, that's fine. It's not simply a case that you're buying carbon offset credits, because that won't fly. I think that a couple of the questions around why Celtic Norse is landing where it's landing, around why it's landing in Killala. I mean, I think there's a very clear reason for that being that it can connect directly into AEC1 to Aikibble landing station. But I would ease Paul's concern around Northern Ireland, because it's very much on our radar for increasing that web connectivity that Scotland really drastically needs. So we are very much looking to Northern Ireland, we're looking to the Republic of Ireland, we're looking to Norway, and we're looking beyond as well as understanding exactly what the limitations are of the trunk network within Scotland. So we know that we need greater diversity, we know that we need greater capacity, and that some of the existing rollouts, commercial rollouts that organisations like City Fibre, Vodafone are doing, whilst it's great for the metropolitan areas, it's that long distance network, wholesale fibre, that we really need to look at and understand what we have, what we need, and work with commercial partners to deliver that. So I'm not really going to go into much more detail than that, other than we are incredibly supportive of LINX and the Internet Exchange. I was involved with the steering committee many moons ago alongside Charlie, who will be speaking in a couple of minutes. I'm hopeful that he'll let me back on it again, because I think this is definitely something that we want to be a part of within Hosting Scotland and within the wider Scottish Futures Trust and Scottish Government. So that's really all I wanted to say at this point in time. If there's any questions, please either direct them to me now, or you can contact me through the hostingscotland.com website, which again, from some of the questions that came up earlier, I think that is a good initial source of information on what we're doing, what we're about, and what we want to do in the future. So hopefully that helps. So if I can hand back to Stephen for any questions, please.
Right, thanks, James. There's no questions at the moment. Bear in mind the time. What we do, if we do get any, we'll pass them on to you, James, and you can go direct. Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Thanks, James. That's excellent. The next speaker we have is Simon from Pulsant, and he's going to be talking about unlocking opportunity for edge for business. Thanks, Simon.
Good morning, everybody. Let me just do the screen sharing thing. Get that all sorted. Can you all see my screen fine?
Yes, okay, yes. Simon, thank you. Yes.
Great, okay. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. Scotland's really important to us. We have a strong presence and team around the Edinburgh area, particularly, although we're a national company, and really looking forward to this. So just by way of introduction, Simon Michie, CTO. So my job really, if I kind of paraphrase it, is to anticipate the market and then to lead a team that creates solutions to meet needs in that market and engineer those into repeatable managed services that clients can consume. Over the last I would say 9 months, maybe a year, we've been thinking about what edge means to the UK, to Scotland, and to us at Pulsant. Particularly, what is it for us? Try and get under the covers of some of the hype, what's driving it, what the enablers are, and really what the likely use cases are going to be. And so what I want to do here is just share some of that thinking at very high level, and then connect that with some of our investments that have already been announced, but also some of the things we think we might do over the coming couple of years. So that's really the purpose of this. I do just want to say we think about the UK as a collection of connected ecosystems. So I was really pleased to hear that terminology used earlier. I think LINX is a great example of the kind of glue that brings all that together, and we're proud to be here. So I'll just cover this at quite a high level. I was waiting for my screen to go next. Okay, so just a bit of definitions. What is edge? What does it mean to me? Well, you know, it really is right in the hype cycle at the moment. I think, you know, Gartner and Forrester and so on are doing a great job of putting really big numbers around this, as they usually do. And of course, you know, devil's in the detail. We think about edge as essentially layers of distributed cloud stroke compute, whose location is really dependent on the latency requirements of the applications. So really, edge starts with, actually, it's the phone in my pocket. It might move on to the, you know, the router that I connect to in my house, you know, working upstream of that, ultimately into you know, micro sites and you know, mini cloud stacks at the bottom of towers, and then, you know, I think stepping from there into metro and regional you know, cloud stacks. So really, for me, edge is where, you know, where cloud gets a location, where the data is collected is often where it is processed, because it needs to work that way. And what drives it, you know, the whole conversation really is latency and the, you know, how near the applications and data are to the users and devices that are consuming it. So that's kind of my definition piece, and I'm going to focus in here on really what I call the metro edge piece, which is the, you know, to me, that's the glue that underpins the ecosystem, rather than, you know, some of the elements of that are nearer to the user or to the devices. So I talked quite a lot about latency as a driver on the last slide, but there are other drivers too. There's absolutely a whole set of data that, you know, people feel need to sit, you know, inside the UK, inside Scotland, you know, inside their own premises, because of privacy and data sovereignty concerns. Data volumes, you know, although Moore's law is working really nicely, and, you know, the kind of bandwidths that were being discussed, you know, by Erling on the you know, previous sessions, are just extraordinary. You know, volumes are going up, and the need for users and devices to get faster responses is also going up. So there's a whole element there around just data volumes and costs. And then I'll come on to this more than once. I think there's there will be new use cases that land on this capability, on this infrastructure, and although we can't necessarily say what they're going to be doing for us yet, they absolutely are going to be invented. So kind of why now then, really, I think is the question. You know, what's happening in the market, which is driving this conversation right now? If I kind of start at the top left and go around, in terms of cloud, you know, currently 90% of all workloads either sit in a public cloud or a private cloud, or in, you know, a data center on a customer premise. Very little of it currently sits out at the edge. There's a lot of movement in this market at the moment. You've got all the public cloud providers, the large ones, so Amazon, Microsoft, Google, are building versions of their product which are designed to sit closer to the user. So, you know, Google's Anthos, Amazon's Outposts, Azure Stack, and the, you know, collection of tooling that's now landing around that is absolutely, there's a battle going on right now for owning that control plane and that capability. But there's also network vendors making space for compute on their routers. There are some interesting entrants, I think. So Cloudflare have been building on their CDN capability to deliver on, you know, micro compute services alongside that. And F5 made some acquisitions about a month ago into Volta Stack, I think it's called, which will allow for Kubernetes workloads to sit, you know, to effectively sit across the edge globally, but managing that, you know, with that central control plane. So a lot of technology is now becoming available and is landing. Network is the other piece on here. I again really glad to hear about investments in full fiber. I think the the UK is quite a long way behind, Europe and most of Scandinavia in terms of getting full fibre out to customer premises and to business premises. It almost feels like dark ages, but it's great to see there's a good deal of money now landing on fixing that, and a great deal of effort going on to deliver full fibre to where it needs to be. Obviously, 5G is also the next trigger because it brings very low latency and fast speeds to mobile applications, and as that rolls out, that'll become even more of an enabler. Connected devices. There was a lot of hype around this in about 2014, and again, lots of big numbers from Gartner and Co. And I think it's kind of settled in now, and there's been an enormous growth in just the number of connected devices, both in businesses but also in the houses, in homes. I did a quick count up this morning in just the house I'm in now. I think there's about 40 devices where 10 years ago there would have been 1 or maybe 2. And all those things are creating data. We all know this, but it's it really means that applications are out there, not just servicing users, but also servicing devices. And then I think the fourth dimension is the UK has got a great deal of credentials in software development and a great deal of innovation, and the creation and of tech clusters. So around Edinburgh, around Oxford, Cambridge, Leeds, York, each specialising in certain markets, gaming, fintech, biotech, and so on, means there's a fantastic resource of application innovators who are just ready to take advantage of all these other enablers. So hopefully that's kind of answered, or hopefully helps you with some of the why now question. So use cases, this is where I think the thinking starts to really hit the road. In the near term we think is 0 to 2 years, something like that. Most of the use cases for Edge are going to be variants of what we have today. So it's going to be enterprise, components of enterprise applications, either IaaS or PaaS or containerized, with portions of it running nearer to a user community. Absolutely within that is the whole piece around remote working and what whatever new normal is going to look like. We don't quite know yet how that's going to land, but I think we do know it's going to be different. Also, there's the operational transformation around IoT, smart city, and the analytics that drives, together with the evolution of content delivery and the huge inertia behind gaming and moving that to a cloud gaming model. So those are the things that we see are going to drive this over the next 2 years. Probably worth putting a bit of reality around that, which is that right now we think less than 10% of workloads actually need latency of less than 10 milliseconds, but we do think that will grow. In the medium term, so kind of 2 years plus, maybe 2 to 5 years, this is where I think we're going to see applications and use cases. Firstly, that are in trial today, but are going to scale up. So, cloud augmented, AR and VR. No, you shouldn't have to do AR as a batch job. You should be able to do it in real time, and I think that will drive usage. Obviously, remote healthcare is something which has been driven very hard over the last 12 months, and we see only increasing, and we see that enriching. And then I think there's the next piece of this is going to be, as 5G rolls out, there's going to be the whole mobile applications, and everyone talks about autonomous vehicles, probably the most obvious example, but there are going to be many others, some we know and some we don't know, that are going to depend on both the compute capability and the low latency networking, in the same way that when broadband rolled out across the UK, it changed everything for us. It made life a bit easier, but actually we soon started consuming new applications. So these are the use cases that we see. So wait for my slide to build. So just a quick wrap up then. So, what are we doing about this? Where are we investing our money? And if I just play back to the opening comment I made, which is that we see the UK as a groups of connected ecosystems, and it's the application developers, the ISVs, the SaaS providers, it's infrastructure, it's telecoms, it's cloud and compute, it's managed service providers coalescing around geographies in order to drive digital programs into those communities at the right pace. And by the way, we think that pace is going to increase, because if there's one learning out of the last 12 months of pandemic and COVID, I think it's that organizations have got brave, and they've known how to transform at pace and with more limited resources. So we see that accelerating. So what we're doing is we're building out at several levels. We're building a new national backbone, which is as low latency as we can get it, in order to deliver traffic across those ecosystems. And fundamentally, our design goal across the piece is to be able to get coverage of roughly 95% of the UK population with the lowest latency that we can get. And we'd like to get that down to 5 milliseconds if we can, because we think that will support on a wide basis some of the new applications that are going to get developed. We're also going to be dropping modern compute stacks into these geographies to support not just IaaS workloads, but also more modern workloads based on Docker and Kubernetes, and providing with tooling for those application developers, either directly or through our technology partners, to be able to leverage the opportunity. So a quick roundup there. I just want to say thank you again. I hope that was useful. I would love to have some conversations on the back of this. This is, I think, an emerging opportunity, particularly around Edinburgh, to develop and talk about and promote the ecosystem. And I think the Edge is one of the catalysts that can bring that to life. So I would, again, my contact details are on here. I'd love to get into some conversations about it.
Simon, thank you. That's great. We won't take any questions now because we're just running out of time. But thanks for that. If any questions were forwarded on to you, I was particularly interested on the use cases. It's nice to see something different apart from autonomous cars. That seems to be the common theme when people talk about Edge. So that's great. Thanks, Simon. And last but not least, we're going to go to Charlie, who's CTO of Commsworlds and also chairman of the LINX Scotland Steering Committee. Charlie, over to you, sir.
I'll not go into the history just because we don't have time, but what I will do is just go into the steering committee very quickly. So what is the steering committee there to do? So it's a small group of people, either members of the exchange or other stakeholders, such as James, Scottish Futures Trust, be an example of people who would sit on the steering committee. And yes, James, we definitely need you on the steering committee. Who aren't necessarily members but are stakeholders. So we have a group of people there who are focused on driving the success of the exchange, whatever that means. Those people need to have an awareness to some extent of the regional landscape, the various business networks, business social networks as opposed to physical networks, and the relationships that go on so that we can leverage all of that. As I said, linking Scottish Government is useful, although we've debated in the past whether or not that is something that we want direct input in from, and in the past we have had, and it's led to great success. It's not necessarily the way to build or the only way to build the exchange and drive success. And crucially, the steering committee is there to act as a gateway for LINX, who have all sorts of other activities on the go in terms of driving support of all their exchanges. But the steering committee is there to provide a gateway to them and into the rest of the community. So, previously when we had these meetings, we've not had meetings for a long time. We set some objectives. Those are well out of date. I think the first thing we do when we sit down again will be to redefine those. Ultimately, we want to grow the IX, so we want to get this internet exchange bigger and better and succeeding. Now, the question is, what are the metrics for success? We don't really have those particularly well defined. Could that be just throughput? I mean, that's generally how people would measure the success of a network, but maybe not the best measure for a regional exchange, just because I think there's a limit to the throughput, and it's hard to not compare that against, you know, London and Manchester and places which are going to naturally see an order of magnitude more traffic. Maybe the number of networks connected, but again, that's likely to be limited. Could be the number of sites that the exchange is present at, etc. I don't have those answers, and these are the things that we need to define as a steering committee. And then ultimately, you know, how long before we declare success, or do we give up if we can't say that we have success after a certain period? So these are all things that we need to get stuck into again and revisit. So how are we going to do that? We need to be organized, and I think in the past we've gone through periods of having a reasonable organization and then lost interest around the table. So we need to get commitment from the various people who are on the committee, and actually we need to get buy-in from their employers, because a lot of people are putting in their spare time, and you know, this is a labor of love as opposed to something that's going to drive business for them or improve operational efficiency or whatever it is that their job is. So we need to make sure that their employers have bought into this. We want to leverage their social networks so that we can bring in the wider community. We don't want to have the legal gentleman situation where we only let Scottish people join the Scottish Exchange. We want to make sure that this is bringing people in from outside who have customers or have eyeballs or content that needs to be served in Scotland. And I think something that we really need to do is be realistic and focused and qualify those potential opportunities for growth, as opposed to, you know, simply just going after every little thing that has a sniff of a potential interest. I think there's some realities in there, such as, you know, we may never get BT and TalkTalk and Virgin Media to join the exchange. So spending an awful lot of time on those sorts of endeavours might be a waste of time. But, you know, that's where that qualification process comes in. And again, that's something that the steering committee needs to be doing. So that was just very, very, very quickly rattling through what we hope to do with the steering committee. And we'll be organising some meetings going forward. If you're interested in getting involved, if you were interested before and you'd like to continue your involvement, then let me know. I'll be reaching out to some of you who were previously involved, and some others as well. So give me a shout if you're interested, and yeah, we'd love to just get some more focus behind it and push the exchange to further success. That's me.
Charlie, thanks very much. That's great. I can only reiterate, you know, our support for the steering committee, and you know, Terry's there as our point man now. So let's hope we can get more attendance and drive more success. So no, thank you very much, Charlie. That's great.
No worries. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for attending, both and speakers especially. I thought it was very useful and very informative. Really found the session good, and I hope you all did as well. There will be a survey popping up after the event closes, so if you could support us in filling that out, that'd be great. Give some feedback. There's nothing left to say. Thanks to everybody, and have a good day, everybody. Bye bye.